Hello again, friends. Welcome to another In Other News. And this is news that I know nobody in the United States has been paying attention to, unless you're a World Regions alumni who know such terms as Yasukuni Shrine, a shrine in Japan. Let's entitle this one Shinzo Shrine Shenanigans. Is Japan swinging to the nationalistic right? It does appear that way, but let's get into it and do it, shall we? First off, happy May Day, May 1st, 2013. Sorry for the extended hiatus. I've been sicker than a dog after taking a trip down to Oklahoma. And let me tell you, Oklahoma is okay. Little geography humor there. And then I got a wicked chest cold, so I'm just now rebounding. Sorry, I'm not quite in the swing of things and a couple weeks behind on podcast. And so this story actually happened last week, or a little bit before. It was April 21st. But the implications of which I think are important enough for us to assess, talk about, discuss in further detail so that you're going to be smarter about what's happening in the world, specifically the Pacific world. So, what is this shrine of which I speak? The Yasukuni Shrine is a shrine dedicated to Japan's war dead, like 2.5 million of them, which I assume means, and somebody check my death geography here, I'm assuming if you have 2.5 million people in a certain place that they are cremated. They certainly don't have their bodies in graves, because that'd be a hell of a big cemetery, although I could be wrong. I believe it's the Eastern way for dead folks to be cremated. I believe that's the Shinto way. I believe that's the Chinese way as well. But somebody from the area, check my facts on that. Anyway, this particular shrine, it's much like memorials around the world for the war dead. We have several, like Arlington Cemetery here in the United States. And these are places that presidents or prime ministers of other country would go to show their respects to the fallen soldiers of their country. Okay, what's the big deal? Well, not only does the Yasukuni Shrine, and I believe it's also within the greater Tokyo metropolitan area, not only does it house about 2.5 million dead Japanese soldiers, or their ashes, it just so happens that 14 of those folks, maybe a few more, but 14 of those war dead in this shrine were convicted war criminals from World War II. Convicted and hung in Japan by a U.S.-Japanese court tribunal, or maybe it was just the United States World Court Tribunal, that said, yeah, these folks from the Japanese military were responsible for basically genocide, for policies which took over the Korean peninsula and enslaved the entire Korean population. These guys were responsible for chemical, biological warfare against Chinese citizens. All of this was taking place in the lead up to and during World War II. And there were horrific policies on the sides on behalf of the Japanese military, and of course the military is controlled by the government. So this is why it's so distasteful to Chinese and Korean folks that these war criminals are paid tribute to at the Yasukuni Shrine anytime a leader of Japan, a top leader of Japan, goes to pay their respects. This entirely pisses them off. For those of you that have been in my class, you already know the easy analogy I give is, this may be hard for us on our side of the planet to understand why Chinese and Japanese people, or Chinese and Korean people would get so pissed off just because a Japanese politician goes to a shrine. Who cares? The analogy I give in class that I bet a lot of you remember is, it would be the equivalent of Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany going and putting a wreath on Nazi war dead memorial. Oh, look, we built a memorial for German war dead, including the entire Nazi party, and Hitler's in there too. We're going to go pay our respects. That would be, something would catch Europe on fire with protest. People around the world might even protest about that. The Germans don't do it, by the way. They don't have such a memorial. So that's the spirit that I try to convey, is that it's that sentiment. For Chinese citizens, millions and millions and millions of which that died during World War II under Japanese occupation. And for Korean citizens, I don't know that millions died in Korea, but the entire state was taken over by Japan in 1895 and made into a big slave work camp. And they weren't liberated until 1945. So you have a 50-year period in which the entire Korean population are slaves, and during the World War II period where the entire Chinese population was subjected to horrific acts, and perhaps 20 or 30 million of them died. Million with an M. I didn't stutter. So this, even though it's 70 years ago now, almost 70 years since World War II, these are things that whenever a top Japanese official, only the top ones, when a top Japanese official goes to pay their respect to the Yasukuni Shrine, this is met with condemnation and rage in China and Japan. And even though it's been 70 years, the rage has not subsided. Now, back to current events. Did Shinzo Abe, the Prime Minister of Japan, go and visit this shrine? No, he did not. It's May. Well, last week when this happened was April. But it's a spring festival in Japan. And it's customary for folks to go visit this shrine during this kind of spring festival type deal. So past prime ministers actually have visited this shrine in Japan, much to the chagrin and rage of China and Korea. And so what has happened in the last, gosh, I think it's probably been 6 or 7 years since a prime minister visited. And so the last 6 or 7 years, the Japanese government has basically said, oh, you know what, let's not press these buttons. We're not trying to piss people off. Let's make sure we don't visit so that we don't infuriate our big trading partners, China and South Korea. And that we show respect, that we say, hey, we dig it, we understand you guys are still pissed off about World War II. We've apologized, we've made amends, and we're not going to try to get you fired up by going to visit in this shrine. So nobody has done it, and Shinzo Abe, for his part, did not visit last week. But his deputy prime minister did. This guy named Taro Aso. Aso! He actually used to be the prime minister! Prime Minister Aso! Former prime minister, current deputy prime minister, and the finance minister. He's currently the finance minister. So he's not the top slot in Japan, but he's pretty high up. So Taro Aso, I just love his name. He actually did visit on April 21st, and that was enough. He wasn't the top official, but he's pretty high up, and it's been the first time for, again, 6 or 7 years that a pretty high-ranking official went and visited, and as completely predictable by those of us that watch the world and understand a little bit about what's going on, completely predictable, South Korean President Park Jin-hong totally pissed off and expressed her dissatisfaction. Both of the Chinese leaders, President and the Prime Minister, both came out and said this is horrific. Some protest in both countries, although not as huge as they've been in the past. And official condemnation from both countries saying, hey, this is a big deal. For their part, I think it might have been President Park or one of her upper cabinet members was supposed to be going to Japan for a visit. That got canceled. There was 2 different high-ranking officials from China that were supposed to go to Japan for some trade talks. All that got canceled too. So again, this is real. I'm not making this up. This isn't my assessment that people are getting angry and that it's a big deal. It's a big deal because people say, well, we're not coming to visit. That trade deal just got shot, and we're angry now at you, Japan, and we're probably not going to be as friendly because now we're leery that you're starting to go back towards your ultra-nationalist right-wing roots. I think that may be a bit of an overstretch by the Koreans and Chinese, but I understand. I totally get it. Now, the other reason why that folks are starting to say, really, is this shrine thing becoming a big deal again? It is, because Taro Aso not only was a high-ranking official that went, but 168 other parliamentarians went. And that is kind of a big deal. That's a bigger number than they've had for a long time. So during this festival, a whole bunch of other politicians went too, like more than usual. They're all of the Liberal Democratic Party, the LDP. That's the place to be in Japan. The LDP is kind of like the conservatives, say, kind of like the Republican Party in the United States. On the conservative side, center-right, they've been in charge of Japan for most of its post-war history, and they just got back into power in terms of the top slot as prime minister. So this is interesting, and again, it's food for thought that this center-right group just got back into power, and they have almost always controlled the Diet, the parliament. And now they're in the prime minister seat. And by the way, Shinzo Abe himself was a former prime minister 5 years ago. So they've kind of consolidated power on the center-right, and lo and behold, all of a sudden, more of them than usual go to this shrine, which infuriates surrounding countries. What's the assessment here? What's the take-home? We could, emphasis on could, but that's why we want to be smart and pay attention to events, so we know when it happens we're not surprised. We could be seeing a possible new face for Japan, a face they have not presented for, gosh, 70 years. And that is a rebirth of Japanese nationalism. Now, nationalism is, yay, our country's awesome, yay, our country's strong, yay, we love our country. Every country has people that feel that way. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a country if people weren't proud of their heritage and their country. I'm not suggesting that there's not nationalistic pride in Japan already. I'm talking about a new sense of overt nationalism, a new sense of we're tired of apologizing for Japan's past type of nationalism. I'm talking we might want to rewrite the Constitution to be a stronger, more forward-thinking, more independent Japan type of rebirth of nationalism. A lot of folks are, I think, perhaps rightly worried about this. I myself am not. I'm not from China or Japan or Korea. But I can see where people in the hood are starting to say, are we seeing a rebirth of this sense of nationalistic pride, because that's what got Japan in trouble in the first place. That's when that sense of Japan's so awesome and we're so strong and we're going to do what we want to do, that's what led them to be an imperial power and take over big parts of China and take over the Korean Peninsula and try to dominate and take over Asia during World War II. So that is why China and Korea is like, hey, whoa, are you guys going down that road again? Because we suffered pretty greatly under that, and we're not happy about that, and we're not happy that even it's a hint or a smack of it in the air that you might be doing that again. And here's what I want you to also take home about Shinzo Abe. Our main man, Abe, looks like Abe, pronounced Abe. Used to be prime minister, only lasted like 8 months. Back as prime minister again. Center-right, conservative, LDP party. Back in large and in charge. He is surging in popularity right now. They're doing, him and Tara Aso, the guy I just talked about, Aso, are rejuicing the Japanese economy. Huge government investment to try to get the economy going again after 30 years of stalling. Huge government investment, laxing a lot of financial rules so that they're trying to encourage infusion of capital and investment and people spending money. And they are being met with rabid popularity right now. Approval ratings over 70%. It's important to understand this because this is going into the psyche of, well, this may be our time to go ahead and pull back our Japanese nationalistic pride again. He's surging at the polls, very popular, and he's always been a conservative guy. I think he's the son or grandson of one of the former prime ministers from like 50 years ago. He has a strong sense of Japanese national pride. He personally himself has said he's tired of the apology era of Japan. His words, not mine. He's saying, look, we've made amends, we've paid money, we have repented. It's time for Japan to stand back up and stop living under the shadow of apology for World War II. So this is important that it's this particular guy and it's happening at this particular juncture, and he's really particularly popular right this second. He has, note this in your brain, Shinzo Abe has, in the past and now, been saying, hey, we should rewrite our Constitution to eliminate that clause that makes us only a self-defense force. We should probably have a real military again. We should have offensive capabilities in our military again, and we should have collective responsibility with our military again, meaning we should get rid of that clause which in the Constitution which limits our military power so that we can be ready to not attack other countries, but be ready to go on the offensive if we have to for a preemptive strike, but more importantly, be able to defend our allies in the region if they need help. And that's important because right this second, you know that the United States is amassing military strength in the Pacific and in Japan. If the United States goes to war with North Korea tomorrow, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm saying, got to think hypothetically here. If the United States and North Korea go to war, Japan actually can't get involved. They can't even help the United States because of their constitution. And so Abe's saying, dudes, the time is past on this. I'm done with apologizing. Japan is awesome. I'm done with the limitations on our military. Let's do this. And he's surging in popularity. Therefore, it might get done. Holy cow. That's why this story is so important. And nobody in America knows anything about it. Let me finish up with this. Why is this such a big deal right this second? I've already started to allude to some of these things. But let me throw in a few more. You already know from former podcast and class that the Japanese and China have been locked in a 2 to 3 year skirmish over a group of rocks, the Senkaku Islands. This couldn't come at a worse time. Relations have already been tense between these two Asian powerhouses over a group of rocks. And then the thing is, we all know, it's not about the rocks. This is nationalistic pride on both sides. Perhaps it has some strategic value for China or Japan, but it's nationalistic pride. They're just rocks. So you already have a dispute about that. We have North Korea possibly getting ready to implode or explode at any given second. You have a ramping up of U.S. armed service personnel, battleships, aircraft carriers in Korea, in Japan, in and around the whole North Pacific, just to counter the North Korean threat. The United States has already talked about putting in more and bigger and better missile defense shields. Those are going to go into Japan, by the way. So you have a whole bunch of things that are happening all of a sudden that is going to escalate tensions possibly in a very big way between Korea and China and Japan on the other side if Japan continues to maybe march down this rightward-leaning, ultra-nationalistic path. And again, they're not yet. They're not. But now I think I've given you a bunch of factors to think about are they? Is Shinzo Abe's popularity going to swell his head a little bit and him say, well, let's go ahead and do this. We have the power to do it. We got the people backing us up. Or will Japan's population say, hey, we put that clause in there for a reason. Let's keep it. We're not trying to piss off our Asian neighbors, and we're definitely not trying to get into a military situation where we have to go to war again. That would be offensive to everybody in the region. Not to the U.S., but to everybody else in the region. That's why I think it's important to understand Shinzo's Shrine Shenanigans, although he himself did not visit. Got any questions, comments, or concerns about this? I think it's a pretty heavy story that, of course, no one in America gets at all, but you do.